20,000 years ago, during one of the coldest and most difficult periods in human prehistory, an elderly man died somewhere on the vast frozen plains of what is now Russia. The world he lived in was genuinely harsh by any measure. The last ice age had locked much of the northern hemisphere under glaciers and brutal temperatures. The landscape was dominated by mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and large predators. There were no agriculture systems, no permanent settlements, no stored food supplies to fall back on during difficult seasons. Every calorie had to be hunted or gathered. Every winter had to be navigated through skill, cooperation, and accumulated knowledge of the land. Under those conditions, keeping an elderly person alive required real investment from the entire group. Time, food, protection, and attention that could have gone elsewhere. So when archaeologists excavating an Upper Paleolithic burial site uncovered this man's grave in the 20th century, what they found inside it raised an immediate and fascinating question. His body had been buried with thousands of individually handcrafted ivory beads, each one shaped, drilled, and polished by hand from mammoth tusk material. The arrangement of those beads across his remains suggested they had been sewn onto tailored clothing rather than scattered loosely around him. The sheer scale of labor that burial represented shocked researchers and sparked decades of investigation into what it actually meant. Why would a community living at the edge of survival devote that level of resources to the burial of a single individual? The answer archaeologists have pieced together reveals something genuinely unexpected about who our Ice Age ancestors actually were. The archaeology and the labor. The burial site where this man was discovered is part of the Sungir archaeological site located near the city of Vladimir in modern Russia, which has been studied extensively since its excavation began in the 1950s and 1960s. The site contains multiple burials from approximately 34,000 years ago, somewhat older than the 20. Sungir estimate, sometimes cited in popular summaries, and represents one of the most remarkable collections of Upper Paleolithic burial evidence ever found. The older male individual discovered there was buried with an extraordinary quantity of grave goods, with ivory bead counts across the Sungir burials reaching into the thousands. To understand what that actually meant in practical terms, researchers conducted experimental archaeology, attempting to recreate the beads using tools and techniques that would have been available during that period. The results were illuminating. Producing a single ivory bead from raw mammoth tusk material through to a finished, polished, drilled object required somewhere in the range of 45 minutes to an hour of skilled labor under careful working conditions. When that figure is multiplied across thousands of beads, the total labor investment represented by those burials runs into thousands of hours of concentrated skilled work. For a small mobile community where every productive hour directly contributed to survival, hunting, gathering, preparing food, maintaining shelters, caring for children, that scale of investment in a burial ceremony is not a casual or incidental thing. It is a deliberate, costly, communal decision. Someone made the judgment that this person was worth that effort. And that judgment itself tells us something significant about the values and social structures of the people who made it. Knowledge, care and cooperation. The most compelling explanation researchers have developed for why elderly individuals held significant status in Upper Paleolithic communities comes down to one fundamental reality of life before writing. Knowledge had nowhere to exist except inside living people. In a world without books, records, or any external storage system, the entire accumulated understanding of a community, which migration routes animals followed during hard winters, which plants in the local environment were medicinal and which were toxic. How to navigate particular landscapes, how previous generations had survived unusual weather patterns or environmental disruptions, lived exclusively in the memories of experienced individuals. An older person who had survived for several decades in that environment was not simply an additional mouth to feed. They were a walking archive of information that could not be replaced once lost. This understanding helps explain another category of archaeological evidence that has emerged from prehistoric sites across multiple continents. Researchers have found skeletal remains of individuals who survived serious physical injuries, healed fractures, conditions that would have left people temporarily or permanently unable to contribute fully to hunting and food gathering, yet who lived for years or even decades after those injuries occurred. B. That kind of survival requires sustained support from other group members. Someone providing food, someone offering physical protection. B. Someone choosing to invest in a vulnerable individual's recovery and continued life. These findings, taken together, B. paint a picture of prehistoric human communities that maintain genuine long-term care practices for injured, ill, and elderly members. B. That capacity for sustained cooperation and resource sharing across the full lifespan of community members may have been one of the most important practical advantages early humans had over competing species and rival groups. The broader meaning and closing. What the Sungir burial and similar archaeological discoveries ultimately challenge is a deeply ingrained assumption about prehistoric life. The idea that early humans operated primarily through competition, B. dominance, and the straightforward logic of physical strength determining survival. That picture has never been entirely accurate, B. and the evidence accumulated over decades of archaeological research makes it increasingly difficult to sustain. Again and again, at sites spread across Europe, Asia, and elsewhere, researchers find the same pattern, B. deliberate, careful burial of the dead, evidence of long-term care for injured and elderly individuals, and signs of complex social bonds strong enough to support people through extended periods of vulnerability, B. The Sungir burial fits within that broader pattern while representing one of its most visually striking examples, B. The thousands of hours of labor embedded in those ivory beads were not wasted effort from a survival standpoint, B. They were an expression of something that may have been one of humanity's most practically valuable traits, the ability to recognize and invest in the accumulated worth of individuals whose contribution to group survival was not immediately obvious in physical terms, B. Intelligence, language, tools, and fire are all commonly cited when scientists discuss why human beings became so ecologically successful as a species. But the cooperative networks, B. intergenerational knowledge transfer, and long-term care practices visible in the archaeological record suggest that social investment played a role just as significant as any technology, B. The old man buried at Sungir 20,000 years ago left behind no name, no story we can read, and no direct descendants we can trace, B. But the grave his community built for him has survived long enough to tell us something worth knowing. That even in one of the harshest environments our species ever inhabited, B. the people living through it recognized that some things mattered beyond immediate survival.